Hello everybody and welcome back to another Pokémon Emerald video. Today I will be playing through the game with an Arbok. This is a not so famous Pokémon from the first generation. And honestly, I was a bit surprised to see that there are a lot of two-stage monotype poison Pokémons in the first generation. Arbok, Mac, Weezing, that may not seem that much, but considering that there were only 151 Pokémons, it is kind of a lot in proportion. Anyway, for the rules, I will only be using my starter in combat. I can't use items from my bag in battle, I can't raise my evasion in any way, and I can't use cheats or glitches. Unfortunately, Arbok's starting moveset is not very good, other than Bite. That move is not bad for the start of the game, and I am sure it will be able to carry us, at least for the early game. Arbok's stats are not that great in general, but considering my standards, they are not that bad. The only unfortunate part is that the special attack is quite low. Between the nature and the low EVs, I will not be able to do a whole lot with special moves. For the grunt in the forest, I could have spammed Bite, but since Poochyena resists it, I tried to switch to other moves. Unfortunately, they are not very powerful, so even though it is a stab, Poison Sting still deals very little damage. This gave Poochyena enough time to use multiple sand attacks on me, and so the fight dragged on for quite a while because I missed a bunch of times. Eventually we can defeat that wall and move on to the next major fight of the game, which is the first gym fight against Roxanne. Fortunately, she does not have any ground type attacks, because those would hurt a lot, but still her Geodudes and mostly her Nosepass can deal good damage with rock moves. On the other hand, I can only really attack them with Bite, and even though it is special, it still deals not a whole lot of damage, and so this fight too took a whole bunch of turns to conclude. Things got a bit scary against her ace Nosepass, because she was able to heal it multiple times, and so my HP also got low, but fortunately I was able to defeat her before she could do the same to me. Now that we have conquered the first gym, we can do the Pico side quest, and here we have to defeat another Poochyena. Unfortunately, I am still stuck with the previous moveset, and I have to use Poison Sting to defeat Poochyena. Once again, the damage is bad, and that leads to sand attacks, and that leads to a bunch of wasted turns. At least I was able to defeat it in the first attempt. It would have been very embarrassing to lose there. Before we can leave town, we are approached by May for an optional fight. Of course, we take her up on her offer, and so we start the match against her. Her team is a bit scary with Torkoal because it has a lot of stats for this point in the game, and Mudkip can be annoying with Mudslap, but since it is not a stab and has low power, it is not a problem yet. Even though I resist fighting type attacks, I still decided to skip Brawly for now, since my damage output is not very high, and even though I may live a bunch of turns, I still don't want him to set up a whole lot. Instead, I went to Slateport, where we can defeat a couple extra Team Aqua grunts. These guys are a bit annoying because my only decent attacking move is Bite, but it makes contact and is resisted by Carvanas, so this time I take a bit of damage from Rough Skin. Unfortunately, after this fight is where things start to go not so well for me. The next challenge against our rival proves to be quite the wall, because Marshtomp now has a Mud Shot, and that move, being super effective and stab, it hurts a lot. Even more so if I decide to use Swagger to make him hit himself, but that turns Mud Shot into an almost one-hit KO. After a couple of attempts, I get a bit lucky and Marshtomp hits itself a few times, which gives me enough turns to completely beat her team. Before taking on Wattson, I decided to backtrack and clean up Brawly. That was mostly to get a bit more XP, since I expect Wattson to be a major issue. Anyway, even though I still have to attack them with the Bite, which is not a great option since they resist it, that move is still decent enough to let me get through this fight. For Makuhita, I tried to use Glare to maybe get myself a couple extra turns and swagger him, but ultimately all of that was not really needed, as Bite still deals okay damage. Now that we are done with the second gym leader too, we can get back on track and take on the fight against Wattson. I really dislike the fact that I'm still stuck with the Poison Sting, even at level 35. I will be able to learn Acid in a couple extra levels, but I did not want to spend a bunch of time grinding against the wild Pokémons, and I am not even sure how much of a difference that move would do, considering that Magneton is immune to poison attacks. So of course I have to pull out the Swagger strategy here too, and hope that he will hit himself a bunch of times. Unfortunately, in this attempt, Wattson did not use his super potions on the first two Pokémons, and so he saved both of them for the Magneton. That is quite bad for me, because I do not want to spend any more turns than I need against this thing. He is most likely going to deal good damage to me and confuse me, which is even more annoying. Not to mention the pretty much guaranteed paralysis unless you are able to defeat it in a couple of turns. After a while, Magneton goes down, but I am left in a kinda bad position for Manectric, as my HP is quite low. Fortunately, Swagger still proves to be a great move, causing Manectric to hit himself a couple of times, just enough for me to defeat it. Now that we have the Wattson badge, we can use Rock Smash to explore more of the region, and eventually we reach the Meterfall Caves. Here we find the two teams of the region having a bit of a fight, and then we have to climb the volcano to stop Maxi from doing his plan. Along the way, you can also get the Secret Power TM, which is great, since it's a move that pretty much every Pokemon can learn, has good damage, sometimes an extra effect, and does not make contact. I lost once against Maxi because ground attacks really hurt, especially coming from the Camerupt. Magnitude 8 can take off a solid 60% of my HP, so I can only imagine that the 10 is going to be a one-shot. Once we have defeated Maxi, we can get down from the volcano and start the next fight against the fourth gym leader. Flannery turned out to be a bit problematic, mostly because of Attract. That move made me lose a bunch of turns, and because of that she was able to land a couple of overhits on me and defeat me. In the successful attempt, I tried to swagger her so that she would hit herself and not infatuate me. That did not really work, she still used Tract, but this time I got lucky. I did not get infatuated too many times, and so I was able to defeat her Torkoal before anything bad happened. From here, we have to backtrack quite a bit to one of the first towns in the game. Here we find the normal gym headed by our dad Norman. His team relies on powerful physical attacks, and so I was a bit worried to use Swagger on them, because if I raise their attack even more, they are sure to do a ton of damage to me. So, at least for the start, I tried to defeat them as quickly as I could with the secret power, and while that worked, I still lost a lot of HP along the way. I knew that Slacking would be able to defeat me very easily anyway, and so I risked it with Swagger. Between self-hits and flinches, I got a lot of free turns, and the best part was a lower defense from Acid that allowed me to 3-shot it with the secret power later, before it could do anything. That was a very nice fight against Slacking, I must say. Anyway, no rest for this snake, and now that we can use Surf, we can get to the other half of the region. Here, eventually we reach the Weather Institute, where we can defeat the Team Aqua Admiral Shelley quite easily. Not long after that encounter, we have another fight against our rival. I was a bit worried about this one considering how our previous one went, but I have to say that this time I am quite a bit more powerful. After you get Surf, you can also get the Sludge Bomb TM in the island where Brawly is, and that move is going to be very useful throughout the rest of the run, considering that it has a good base power and it is a stab. I made good use of it by sweeping through May's team, and then I can use it on the Winona fight too, mostly at least. The majority of her team is neutral to it, but I'll have to figure out something else for this armory. Altaria manages to leave a couple of attacks because of the potions and fires back with an earthquake, which surprisingly does not deal that much damage. Of course, Skarmory has to be the usual pain and uses sand attacks quite a few times. Because of those, I miss a lot and he can attack me freely a few times, bringing my HP quite low. Fortunately, I am able to defeat it before I go down, and from there I can land just enough sludge bombs on the rest of her team to defeat them before my HP run out. By defeating Winona, we can now use the HM Fly out of combat, and we'll have to use it in a bit, but first we can take on the last optional fight against our rival. Her team did not change much compared to our previous encounter. She only added a Tropius that will be defeated in a single sludge bomb, since it is weak to poison. Once again, Marshtomp is not enough of a threat at this point to worry, and so, even though I take a bit of damage throughout the fight, I can still come out on top in the first attempt. Next, we go to the Pokémon Tower, where we get the Magma emblem from the lady on top, and here is where we can use a Fly to get away quite quickly, and soon we have to infiltrate the cave where Groudon is. Here, of course, we find Maxie, who has just awoken the legendary, but since the Pokémon ran away, Maxi attacks us in frustration. The fight against his team is kinda scary, mostly because of Camerupt and Earthquake, but since I got very lucky with the flinches from Secret Power, I do not have to find out how much damage Earthquake would do. Crobat is a bit annoying with the usual confusion and stuff, but eventually I can snap out of it and defeat it. Once we are done with this guy, we have to infiltrate the Team Aqua base. Here we are only able to find one of their admirals who is buying enough time for his boss to flee in a stolen submarine. The admiral is not particularly powerful, but the fight against him would have been even easier if I remembered to recharge my Sludge Bomb PPs, but that did not matter in the end. Next I had to do a lot of grinding, because the next major fight is going to be against Tate and Liza, and considering that it's a 2v1 where they have the type advantage, I was expecting them to be a huge pain. And while I lost a few times, it was not that big of a deal. It may also have been because at some point I used a few rare candies, but once I stopped swaggering the clay doll, things went much better. Bite is not particularly powerful, but since it is super effective, it can still deal a decent amount of damage, and more often than not it will two-shot their Pokémons. In the successful attempt, I even had quite a bit of HP left once I won. Now that we have the penultimate badge, we have to go do the other double fight on the island. This time around, we are helped by Steven and have to fight against the leadership of Team Magma. Their teams could be scary because their Camerupts have Earthquake, but since they don't use it very often, I felt somewhat safe. As usual, I tried to defeat all of Maxi's Pokémons first, because once they are gone, the rest of the fight is a breeze. Sludge Bomb made quick work of my Tiena, but I can't really use it on the other Pokémons since they resist it, so instead I had to switch to Secret Power, but that has quite a bit less power. Ultimately, the fight was not that bad. Metang was quite a bit on the offensive today, and so we were able to defeat their Pokémons in a not so huge amount of turns. Once we have beaten up the Team Magma for the third time, they finally give up and stop being a problem for the rest of the game. The same cannot be said about Team Aqua though, so after Steven gives us the Dive HM, we get to the seafloor cave where we meet up with Archie. Much like his ground counterpart, he is obsessed with waking up the legendary, and so we tried to stop him with a fight. The match against him is a bit easier than Maxi, mostly because I do not have to worry about a ground move one-shotting me. And so, after throwing out a few sludge bombs, we are done with this team too. Of course, winning here is not enough to stop the story of the game, and so Kyogre wakes up anyway. With the two legendaries active, the weather in the region is a mess, and to put an end to their fighting, we go ask Rayquaza for help. The Emerald legendary comes down from the clouds and makes the two legendaries break up their fight, and so the world is safe once again. Next, we can go do the last gym, and this one against Juan should be somewhat easy. He uses water types, which are not particularly dangerous against me, The only problematic thing could be Whiscash with Earthquake, but he gets paralyzed, and Kindra, but he gets crit, so this fight was very free in the end. Because of all that luck, it's hard to evaluate how Wallace will be using the performance against Juan. I'll guess we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. First, we have to enter the Victory Road, where we are immediately stopped by Wally. I actually lost once against him. Magneton paralyzed me and then proceeded to beat me down with tri-attacks. That move is kinda rare, but I like it for some reason. Anyway, in the second attempt things go slightly better, but not all that much. I tried to swagger him, which is what got me killed in the first attempt, because with increased attack, that normal move will deal even more damage. I should have used the Earthquake TM, that would have made this fight way easier. Instead, I have to sit here dealing cheap damage to Magneton, since all of my attacks are resisted. Meanwhile, Wally can just use a full restore, negating 5 turns of progress to taking it down. Eventually we can get through this fight, and once we cleared the rest of the cave, we can get to the league. Here I immediately entered it, even if I was not that confident. The only difference is that I got Substitute, because we all know it's an extremely powerful move for the league. Especially because I am using a mostly physical attacker today. The fight against Sidney went fine. Unfortunately, I cannot block the first Intimidate, but at least I do not have to worry about any other RNG moves behind the Substitute. My attack was still good enough to two-shot most of his team, and so we are done with him. The second Elite Four is Phoebe, and she could be slightly more troublesome. I can always block the curse with the sub, which is great, and I don't think I would be able to defeat her otherwise. But for the rest of the team, I just have to bite them over and over again. Sludge Bomb is resisted by her whole team, so I don't think it would do more damage, even though it is stab and physical. This fight takes a bit longer because her Pokémons are a bit tanky, at least compared to Sidney, even if I am attacking them with a super effective move. My Substitute also got broken in the process because one of her Dusclops knows Earthquake. Because of all of that, the fight took many turns, but I never was in that much danger. Next up we have the fight against Glacia, and she is a bit weird. I never know whether to use Substitute or not in this fight, because Glacia will surely use Hail as you set it up, and since Hail hits you behind the sub, you will still end up taking quite a bit of damage. I think that generally it is still worth it, since it will block an attack that may paralyze or freeze you, which are both status effects that, if inflicted on you, are very likely to result in a loss. Things could have gone a bit closer with Wall Rain, but Sludge Bomb still deals enough damage to two-shot it after the berry. And now that Glacia is defeated too, we only have to take down Drake. As you might imagine, the fight against him was not the easiest one of the game. Without any way to boost my attack, I don't think I will be able to one-shot even a single one of his Pokémons. The most dangerous one of them all is Flygon, because he has Earthquake. If he lands a direct hit on me, I am sure that that move will one-shot me. Fortunately, Swagger still proved to be extremely powerful by making Flygon hit itself a couple of times, and because of that I can defeat the ground dragon with my substitute still intact. Kingdra and Altaria both waste time trying to set up, and so I can defeat them very easily. Salamence finally breaks my sub, but that's a little bit too little too late, as I am able to finish it off the next turn. At long last, we have finally reached the champion, and for him I changed my moveset a little bit. I added Earthquake as a solid option to deal with Whiscash and Tentacruel, and also Giga Drain, mostly for Whiscash too, but I might be able to recover some HP here and there by finishing off his Pokémons with that move. Since I blocked Gyarados Intimidate, Sludge Bomb is still a good way to deal with his normal water types. Once Whiscash comes out, I was surprised to see that Giga Drain, even though it is 4 times super effective, it's still not enough to one-shot that Pokémon, and he even used Amnesia to block even more damage. And he used Amnesia too to block even more special damage. That was not enough to stop me though, because from this point I can switch to my physical attacks, and between Earthquake and Sludge Bomb I can easily reach the last of his Pokémons. Milotic tries to defeat me by destroying the substitute, but this time around he is not able to toxic me, so even though he tries to stall, that will only delay the inevitable. After a few turns of back and forth between my attacks and his full restores, Wallace ran out of heals, and so I was finally able to defeat his ace and make Arbok the champion of the Hoenn region. It was not that easy to get here, but I think things could have gone much worse. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like, subscribe, ring the bell, and all of that YouTube stuff. If you have any video ideas, feedback, leave them down below, and I'll see you next week. Bye!